how's it going everyone, and welcome to the first part of my manga making course. Okay, so what you read in the title or whatever does not deceive you. I am making a course for how to make manga, and as you can see by what I wrote here, I hope I spelled it right, it's gonna be in excruciating detail. Basically, I've noticed in the art community, specifically the comic making community, that it seems that for a lot of people, everyone always talks about making manga and wanting to make comics, but nobody actually does it. And for the longest time, I just thought it was an overall lack of discipline amongst, like, you know, the art community. And, you know, basically I noticed younger creators weren't actually creating, right? Everyone's always just drawing fan art, talking about I want to get good enough. And then it dawned on me that a lot of these people are just afraid. They're just afraid to take that first step, reasonably, as it's difficult to take that first step. And so basically they're stuck in this limbo where everyone wants to be the greatest mangaka, but no one can actually make manga. So whatever, what we will be doing throughout this course. So in part one, which is what you're currently watching, which is the first part of the course, we're going to be tackling coming up with an idea, which is the first aspect of making comics and manga. You have to first, you know, you have an idea, right? So part one is coming up with an idea, and basically we're going to talk about pitching an idea, establishing the, you know, the setting and the world building, the character designs and all that stuff, cleaning up the idea into a story, you know, basically all the stuff that you'd need to have ready in order to move on to the next stage, which is scripting, right? And scripting is fairly straightforward, but we're still going to cover it, right? We're going to talk about breaking down your stories into arcs, and then breaking down those arcs into volumes, and breaking down those volumes into chapters. And then in the scripting phase, we're going to talk about how to turn those chapter summaries into actual scripts with dialogue and setting descriptions and even action scenes and whatnot. But yeah, the next part, and by the way, each part comes out every month, right? So this month, part one, coming up with an idea, which is what you're currently watching, right? Next month is going to be scripting. The month after that, it's going to be storyboarding, right? And we're going to talk about the two methods of storyboarding, which is the only two methods I know personally. And then we're going to talk about paneling. Oh my god, I cannot wait to talk about paneling, because a lot of you do not know anything about paneling. Not to say I'm an expert, but my god, a lot of you do not know about paneling. But anyways, after paneling, we're going to tackle page composition and then panel composition within a whole page, right? Because that's also important. That's something that a lot of people don't overlook. And the reason I have it here in the storyboarding section is because it's something that you do in the storyboarding phase. Anyways, after we talk about storyboarding, we're then going to talk about drafting. Now, this is when usually people sketch the more detailed sketch based on what they have in their storyboard. And if you guys know me, you know I don't do the drafting. You know I go from storyboarding directly to the final inks and tones. You know that. But I've always advocated that's not something I want people who follow me to do, not because it's a bad thing, but because most of my followers are beginners, right? And that is a bad thing for a beginner to do. You do not want to be doing that. But anyways, in the drafting section, we're also surprisingly going to talk about lettering, because it's in this section that if I did drafting, I would do my lettering as well, right? Even though we're not inking yet, you want to put down the letters in this section. And then also, we're going to talk about page dimensions, because I get that question a lot. Everyone always wants to know, what dimensions are you using? What's the industry standard? What's safe for print? You know, we're going to talk about that, okay? And then after the drafting part, we're then gonna go to the inking and toning, which is, you know, which is a lot of the manga making process, right? I haven't gotten to it yet, but this is not an art course, right? Yeah, so in the inking section, you don't need crazy drawing skills, and I'm not gonna be teaching that anyways, right? But I'm still gonna give you inking tips. I'm gonna tell you little things that I do when it comes to inking that make my work pop, whether that's inking dark shadows on black clothes, or how I hatch, or the different types of hatching. We're gonna go over all that. And then how to ink action, right? I know I said I wouldn't be teaching how to draw anything, and you know, this isn't really that, but this is something that, you know, I felt I had to cover in this course because it's something I've never seen anywhere else before, right? The little techniques, how to, you know, do the brush strokes to make everything look like it's a motion. We're gonna go over that. Also in the inking section, we're gonna also talk about manga backgrounds. So anyways, after that, we're gonna talk about toning, right? After going over all the inking sections of the inking and toning part, we're then gonna talk about toning, right? And then part 7, which is the last part, is gonna be publishing. And basically in this part, we're gonna talk about going independent versus going with a publisher, right? And if you do decide to go with a publisher, how do you seek one out? How do you pitch your property to an already established publisher? We're gonna go over all this stuff, and I might have some guests in here, you know, every once in a while, who might be better suited to explaining certain things than I can, but that's not a promise. But yeah, moving on from what we're gonna do in this course, the next part that I want to talk about is what this course is not, because we just talked about what it is, right? And like I said earlier, not that long ago, this course is not art focused, right? So I am not teaching you how to draw. I'm not teaching you anatomy. I'm not teaching you how to ink. I'm giving you the knowledge, right? The process of how to make manga, right? All the details that I never found anywhere. These are things that I learned on my own over like years of doing this, right? I will be teaching you how to draw a lot of stuff in this course, right? but it's not a drawing focused one. You guys are not idiots, you get what I'm saying, whatever. The next thing is, I will only be teaching you what I know, right? This course is not an industry standard, right? Everything I talk about in this course might all be fucking useless if you go to Japan, right? I don't think it is, but I'm not saying this is what's done in Japan. I'm not saying this is what's done in Marvel or DC. Basically, take this course as exactly what I'm telling you it is. This course is me, Diddy Mark, teaching everything I know to those who want to learn. This is not the right way of doing things. I am just simply teaching you what I do. So yeah, there you go. And then now that we've talked about what this course is, you know, and what we're gonna do in it, now I want to talk about what you, the viewer, can expect to gain from this course. And I'm sorry if I'm going on a little long. I want to do this introduction section here so I can really start the course, you know, in one video instead of doing it in 2 separate videos. But what can you expect to gain from this course, right? Obviously, besides the knowledge, by the end of this course, if you choose to participate, and I mean genuinely participate in the assignments that I'm gonna give you, and we'll talk about the assignments in the future, but if you truly choose to participate, and mind you, you don't have to participate. You don't have to at all, right? But if you choose to participate, besides the knowledge you'll gain, you will also gain experience, because at the end of the course, you would have made at least a 6-page short story. And we'll talk more about that as the course goes on. Next up, we're now going to talk about the assignments really quick. Basically, what they are is, if you're watching this course actively as it comes out, you know, they're going to be assignments, right? And every assignment, whether it's the main assignments or the little side ones that I will give, they're all optional, right? You're not going to get a grade. There's no grade, right? So these are the rules when it comes to assignments. So these are the general, you know, FAQs. If you have a question, please, if it's not private, any and all questions, if you have one, just ask me on the Ask Me a Question channel on the Discord server. With that said, you know, now we talked about the assignments. After that, next up, and this is kind of exciting news for, I guess, for you guys, or maybe it's not, I don't care, but it might be exciting to you guys. Lastly, the entire time while I'm making this course, you are gonna be firsthand watching me make a manga from start to finish. Okay, and that manga is, as you can see on the screen, if you can recognize the character, I'm going to be making a Ben 10 fan one-shot. Now, hold on. Okay, so in this course, like I said, the goal is for you to create a short story. Now, for you watchers, listeners, you are not allowed to choose an existing character for your short story. You're not allowed. You have to come up with something original, like the theme, what it's about. That's all up to you, but it has to be original. You can't use fan art. The only reason why I'm doing an established character and making a fan manga is because it makes things easier on my part. So I have to forego a lot of the, like, you know, world building, character design, coming up with lore, stuff that would eat up too much of my own time already as it is, because I have my own projects to work on. So basically, it's easier for me to work with something that's already established and has like rules and lore and characters I can just pick and use how I please in just a story setting. So, but yeah, with that said, that's pretty much all the introductory details I wanted to give about the course. Okay, so now that we've done all the introductory stuff, now let's actually get into the actual first part of the course, right? And this is part 1. Coming up with an idea. Now, really quick, I have a bunch of bullet points here that you can see on the screen, right? Starting with pitching the idea, then establishing the setting, world building, character designs, etc. Cleaning up the idea into a story and planning out the story, and then preparing it for scripting, right? This is what we're going to be going over today, the main bullet points of it all. Buckle along here. It's about to be a journey. So let's get started, right? Okay, so when it comes to making manga, right? Obviously, the first thing you have to do is you have to start with an idea. Because at the end of the day, without an idea, there's no story. Without a story, there's no manga. Without no manga, what the f are you even doing here, right? So first of all, let's come up with the idea, right? And let's actually brainstorm, or let's talk about multiple ways for coming up with an idea. As I said, this is not the right way. There's probably video tutorials that can do it much better than I can on how to come up with an idea, but this is what I do, right? And I have a couple methods. Let's start with the first one. The first one is a method that I'm now, at this moment, I'm gonna call combining shit that already exists, okay? And basically the point of combining shit that already exists is for you, the writer, of course, but mostly, and this goes into the first bullet point that we have here for pitching an idea, it's mostly for you, the artist, but it's also for everyone else to get into the idea of your story, or like the premise of it, right? And basically what that is, for example, my manga Ruthless Render, right, is actually Men in Black. So if you know that franchise, Men in Black with Will Smith mixed with Blue Exorcist. You see, independently, like these are well-known properties on their own, right? People know them well enough that where if you combine both of them, it's like they're so different, you know, it's like the brain almost starts thinking, right? And the more bizarre they are, the more intriguing they sound, right? And I'm not just saying just combine just for the sake of combining it, but it can really get your mind going in a lot of unique places in terms of coming up with story ideas, right? Because let's say I wanted to come up with a completely new idea, something I've never done before, but I can't come up with something. I want something interesting, something that can really capture my readers, something that can capture me, something that can make me really excited to want to make it, right? Let's come up with something random right now, and let's even explore all the realms of what that could possibly be. So for example, let's come up with bear with me here, I'm coming up with this right now on the spot. It's gonna be Power Rangers meets Harry Potter. All right. So I want to come up with a new idea, right? I have no idea what this could be, but the fact that I'm looking at these two concepts side by side, I'm trying to combine them to make something new. It's got my brain thinking in a lot of different directions it wouldn't have gone otherwise, right? Because how do I naturally know to combine an old school that's been established for thousands of years for wizards with, like, you know, Power Rangers, people who suit up in colorful costumes? It's like they're so drastically different, but it's possible to make something unique, right? Now let's say I wanted to make a manga where there's a school that's been established for decades, right? And so Hogwarts, right? But the equivalent in our one shot is going to be a school that trains people on how to be rangers. So in classes, they learn how to do things like morph, right? And they get, instead of wands, they get their little morpher toy or whatever the Power Rangers use, and they transform, right? So in that sense, that's one of the ways that I come up with ideas. The second way of coming up with an idea that I do personally is there's so many stories all around us, okay? And this one is a lot less interesting than the last way of coming up with an idea, but there's so many stories in the world around you. You just have to take the time and look. And maybe this is a lot easier for me because maybe I just have a different type of brain. But basically what I'm saying is, as you go about your life, try to look a little closer at the world around you and take notes. As I'm walking around, I'm constantly being bombarded with possible amazing stories, and I write them down in a short way that future me can read it and still get the idea of what I was trying to sell. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's my second way of coming up with an idea. Anyways, now that we've talked about the idea and coming up with it, the next phase is, you know, moving on to planning things, right? So you have the idea. Okay, now it's the time of the course that's establishing the setting, world building, character designs, etc. Now, the reason I chose Ben 10, as I said earlier, it's like I get to forego a lot of these steps that would take a lot of time. But on your part, you people, like the viewers, you need to take the time. You need to take the time to establish the setting, world building, character designs, even if it was a one shot, because these little details, these are things that you would show and not tell in like background or background characters. You know, these are things that make the world feel alive, right? Even if you don't directly give attention to them. Does that make sense? So establishing the setting, world building, character designs, these are things I'm gonna forego because I'm already choosing a world that already has a setting that has good world building and already has characters that I can pick from. I'm gonna change the character design up a little bit, but for the most part, I have all that stuff. But for you, this is when you need to flesh out the setting. And basically, the way I like to do things is I like to do a table. In the idea phase when I'm planning things out, which is what I'm teaching you to do right now, I like to use a table. And this helps me easily keep track of the world, its rules, and stuff like that. Because when I'm writing the story, if I ever feel like I'm a little hazy on the way a certain power system works, or maybe the lore of a certain thing, this is where I do it, right? I break it down into a table like this. And then in this column right here, I'll write things like setting, where the story is going to take place, right? And in this column right here, I will then type a summary, a short summary. Don't write an essay here. So, all right, so Ben 10 takes place in the city of Bellwood, the fictional city of Bellwood, all right? So I could write Bellwood, right? Bellwood. But if you're writing a fantasy or an epic, then you would write whatever world you made up, whether that's, I don't know, the Kingdom of Fantasia or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is where you want to really flesh out the details, right? Yeah, you want to flesh it out as much as you want. So if you're making a One Piece level story, right, this column might be much bigger, and that might be justified, right? Even though I say don't go overboard with the summaries. Next up, in this column right here, I'm going to type world building. And then in the column right here, I then follow along with I've moved it into Google Doc now. So yeah, as I was saying, in this setting, you know, this is where the story is going to take place with Bellevue. So if your story takes place in multiple locations, right? So let's assume that my one shot is going to take place in multiple locations. So Bellevue, then I want the story to also take place in an alien ship, right? And then next location could be, I don't know, at a carnival. Let's say I have the main characters fight at a carnival. I think fleshing out the settings can help you in terms of allocating, I guess, energy and effort to design locations. Because if a story mainly takes place in these locations that you've written out, it might incentivize you to really design them up more, as opposed to like locations that might not really matter to the story. Like, let's say they go to a supermarket for a scene or two. You know what I'm saying? Okay, now that we've established the setting, next up is to establish the world building, right? As I said, I chose a world that already has laws and rules or whatever to make things easier for myself since I'm the instructor. But for you, this is where I want you to write down the details. So let's pretend I'm making a fantasy one shot, right? This is how I would do the world building. Okay, you want to write everything that you think matters, right? And this is an aspect of making manga that will take time. The planning stage, it will take time. Unless you're doing a one shot, even then it still kind of takes time. But a series will take time. As I was saying, let's say I'm doing a fantasy world building. I would say 1,000 years ago, a giant died, right, on Midgard. Let's say they have different realms, and for some reason they're named after the fucking realms in Norse mythology. All right, 1,000 years, a giant died on Midgard, and its skull stayed long after its corpse decomposed, and now the main setting, which is the city that whatever city I came up with that the story takes place, the main setting has been built around this giant's skull, and the castle the king lives in is inside its head or something like that. Now see, this is world building, right? This is how I'm starting this hypothetical fantasy world building, right? But anyways, let's continue here with the world building. I put a lot of stuff in this first summary that could be expanded on, right, world building wise. So 1,000 years ago, a giant died. So why are there giants in this world, and where have they gone, right? So this is world building. I can be like, giants have been extinct for decades now, but rumor is you get a million. Let's come up with some currency. 1 million tatas. I mean, that's another word for titties, but ignore that. You get 1 million tatas when you kill one, basically, right? So there you go. That's more world building. So basically, now in the story moving forward, every grimy criminal can maybe every once in a while reference the fact that, like, man, they would like to kill the giant and get the 1 million tatas, you know? And then you could keep going on and on and on and on and on. Because at the end of the day, I'll be very honest. At the end of the day, you will very rarely come back to this Google Doc to reference it when writing your story. At least I do. It's there for you to reference because you have written it, of course. But the point of writing it and typing it out is to sink it into your head, right? The point of me writing down all these world building details is because obviously I'm coming up with the world building details, but it's not because I'm gonna need to come back to it and look at it again in the future. And you might in the future, but it's mostly for it to be ingrained into my brain. So I just know, right? I know this world, I know these characters because I'm sitting here fleshing out the details for it. So there you go. You could keep expanding on the world building as much as you like. So for example, you could continue here. So Midgard, you can talk about the fact that there's realms and why are they named after Norse realms. This is world building. This is stuff that you can't just like think in your head and trust that it'll come to you again. You know, a lot of the times writing things out, not only does it give you an opportunity to go back and reference this again if you forget, but writing it down, as I said, further sinks it into your brain. But anyways, moving on from world building, I think we've talked about that a lot. Next up is then what I like to do in the same table is that I just write characters. And this is very, very important, especially in a genre like manga where it's very character focused, right? And pay attention people. We're still in the planning phase, we're still in the idea phase. So we're planning everything in as much detail as you, the artist, feel is necessary. So in the characters phase, I'm gonna type out what? So I'll type out the character. Let's say, so in this character, it's Ben. Ben is the main character of Ben 10, you know. So it's Ben. Let's do another bullet point, like a sub bullet point. What does Ben want? What does Ben want? If you're doing a series, this is where you get to lay out like character motivations and stuff like that. And I guess that could play into like the larger conflict in the story of what the whole story is about, I guess. At this stage, you don't really need to know that, but if you're getting to the characters, you probably should know that stuff of what's gonna be happening in the story. But what does Ben want? Okay, so in the story, since it's a one-shot, it's not a series, I want it to be fairly simple. I want Ben's character arc to have a beginning, middle, and end, right? Because that's important in a character for them to feel real. They don't always have to come out of it changed or learning something or becoming a different person, but there's not really the course for that to teach you how to write well. Like I said, I'm just teaching you how to make manga. Writing good is something that you're gonna have to learn on your own. Okay, so what does Ben want? This is how I write my characters. I always start off with a couple questions. What does the character want? Let me actually rephrase that. What does the character think they want? Usually most characters there is something they think they want, whether it's to be Hokage, the king of the pirates, or to become the strongest superhero or something, right? So there's what they think they want, but then there's what does the character need. So what does the character think they want, but what does the character actually need? And the reason why you want to know the answers to those two questions is because what the character thinks they want puts you, the writer, at the starting point in terms of the characters, like at the beginning of the story. You know where they are at the starting point. But answering the question of what they need, even if you don't know the story, will at least give you an idea of how you need to progress that character in terms of like character development, right? So in a series, I would even go so far as to even ask the third question, which is what does this character believe? All right, this question is very important, right? And I asked this question in my series for all my characters. And I guess you can do it for a one shot too. I guess go ahead. But the reason you want to ask this question is because a character's core belief, right, how they view the world, it will literally dictate how they move in the story, the decisions they make, the type of people they like to be around. You know, this is very central to a character. What do they believe? The answer could be simple, it could be more complicated, right? So this trinity of what does the character believe, what do they want, but what do they actually need is how you can make a really compelling character, at least at first. That's neither here nor there. And then the last thing characters wise I'll say is, after I talk about what the character believes and I answer these three questions, I then just, really quick backstory. Right? I go backstory and then I write a summary about the character's backstory. As I said, this is an existing character that I'm doing for my one shot Ben, so I don't need to do all this. For your character that you're doing, I want you to write backstory in terms of stuff that's important to the story, right? If there's a traumatic event that really explains like how the character came about their current beliefs, that usually helps when the backstory plays into why the character believes what they believe. Also, by the way, guys, you would do all this, the what does the character think they want, what does the character need, what do they believe? You would do all this, including the backstory, for every single character as much as you want for each of them, right? But whatever, let's move on. Okay, so this is the table method, right? Settings, world building, characters, honestly, this power system. Like if you wanted to flesh anything out, let's say landmarks or something, like if there's a building, like an iconic building could go under there, and I can give some lore, some info about that, of why the building was shaped that way, the architecture of how it works. Like, do the teachers live on campus, do the students live on campus, is it a boarding school? You put that there, and you can do this you can add as many whatever as you want for your story. If you want to have a whole section just for your character's shoes and who's wearing what shoes or their fashion, this is how I organize my idea. So that way, if I'm in chapter 30 something of RR and I don't remember the details of Tadashi's backstory, I can come to this table, easily look, setting, world building, characters. Okay, character, I'm looking for info on the character, scroll Ben, and then I'll scroll out to find Tadashi. It makes things easy. But anyways, we're gonna move on to the next part of the tutorial here, and I'm gonna switch back over to my drawing. And the next part that we're gonna talk about is cleaning up the idea into a story. What does this mean? What this means is that have all the stuff that I showed you earlier on the table now written out. Now we have the details, right? Now it's to turn it into a story in form of a summary. So let's pretend that we are doing a series. So we talked about pitching the idea. We've established the setting, world, building characters, all that stuff in the table like we just did. Now it's for putting up the idea and story. And what that means is that we're gonna take all that we have here and summarize the story. So let's pretend we're doing a series. What I like to do is I like to give a summary, a short, engaging summary of the story, right? And you want to focus on this, right? Break it down, break the story down into a beginning, a middle, and an end. As I said, this is not a story writing course, all right? Pro tip, okay, listeners, pro tip on what makes those parts of a story engaging for the reader. My tip to you is go do your research, go watch a lot of tutorials on something called Dan Harmon's story circle. Now, because this is a course, I'm not gonna just leave you empty-handed, even though this is not a story writing course. But yeah, this video is a very good video. Watch it all, 17 minutes. Speed it up if you want. It goes over all you need to know about Dan Harmon's story circle. So yeah, anyways, as I was saying, use Dan Harmon's story circle to properly break down your story into a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Summarize the entire story. If it's a one-shot, if it's a series, do it, okay? So I'm doing Ben 10, beginning, right? Let's summarize it. Ben, I'm not gonna write it out because it's gonna be too much. But let's say if I was typing it out, which you should if you are, in the beginning, Ben is at a zone of comfort. And if you know Dan Harmon's story circle, you know why I'm starting there. But how did he get pulled out of that zone of comfort? Now let's go to the mid. So that's the beginning we just fleshed out, right? Let's go to the middle of the story, which is now the inciting incidents. Like Ben needs to now go on the journey, which is now the something isn't right phase. This then transitions to the end of the story, or like the summary part. So now that's a summary of beginning, middle, and end, right? And after you have that summary, you then want to move on to the next part of that, which is I then want you to break down the overall summary of the story into arcs. If you're making a one shot, I guess you can end here. If you summarize the beginning, middle, and end, you can pretty much start scripting based off of that. But if you're making a series, I then break down this summary of the whole story, like the whole series, or however many chapters, whether it's 300 chapters or not. I break down this whole summary into arcs. Now, this is gonna take some time, right? So let's pretend I'm turning this Ben 10 one shot into a series. I then break it down into arcs. The first arc, I could be like, I want this arc to be about 5 or 6 chapters, right? And the first arc is gonna tackle everything that happens in the beginning section of the story. And I can break that down into 5 or 6 chapters, right? And then the middle part of the story, which is like the lengthier part that has the action and all the, all the stuff, we can break that down into like 2 different arcs. 2 different arcs. This arc can also be, I don't know, about 8 chapters, and this arc can be about 9 chapters, and then we break the end into arcs as well. And let's say the end will need about 10 chapters, right? And I know I'm arbitrarily breaking it down into random numbers, but what you're gonna do, and this is why it's a lot of work, you are gonna summarize this already beginning part. You're gonna then summarize the beginning into a beginning, middle, and end. So every arc, you take the main summary, you break them down into different arcs, okay, that you want to tackle, and then you summarize each arc into a beginning, middle, and ending. This way, it makes everything as engaging as possible, because not only does the overall story follow Dan Harmon's story circle, now each arc within the overall story also follows the story circle. And then guess what? Afterwards, when you've broken down each arc into beginning, middle, and end summary, you would then do that for each chapter. So these 5 or 6 chapters, you need to summarize each of them into a beginning, middle, and end. Same thing for these 8 chapters. This is why manga is not easy work, right? But I'll say this at least, right? When you're making a series, right? Once you've gotten this far, you can stop, right? After you've summarized each chapter into a beginning, middle, and end, following the story structure, right? Obviously, don't do it to a T because you don't want it to be all samey, but following the general backbone of Dan Harmon's story structure. After that, you can stop. Because I think breaking it down even further, you can, if you want, you can break down each scene and have each scene, I'm serious, you can have each scene follow Dan Harmon's story circle. Establish protagonist, something isn't right, crossing the threshold. Everything can be broken down following this story circle. For the most part, it's a good backbone of what makes a compelling story. And yeah, there you go. So you've now broken each section into a beginning, middle, and end, right? That's what I just showed you, right? And so when you summarize the story, breaking it down into Dan Harmon's story structure, dividing it into an engaging beginning, middle, and end, and then you break that down, like each section, the beginning, middle, and end, into different arcs, and then break down each arc into different chapters, and then use the story structure again at every level. It's not guaranteed to make your story engaging. It makes things interesting. At least I hope so, right? I hope so. But anyways, now that we've cleaned up the story idea, guess what? Guess what all this is? After you've broken all this down by cleaning up the idea into a story, having that table that we made, that you see on the screen right now, taking that and then summarizing an overall plot and breaking that down into a beginning, middle, and end, an engaging one, right? Again, if you want to do a series, you then move on into breaking those down, right? This is how I do it, right? So people who always ask, do you have your series planned out to the end? Yes, I kind of do, because I have that overall summary. But remember, it's just a summary. There's no details. I'm not talking about who's dying. I don't talk about who fights who kills who. I'm not talking about whose mom or dad cheated on. No, it's just a general summary, leaving a lot of room for not adding details of whose name is what and who kills who and who dies and who, you know what I'm saying? That makes things interesting, or I find it makes things interesting for you, the creator. But anyways, as you've done this cleaning up of the ideas I was saying, you've broken it down, guess what now? You're now automatically ready to prepare it for scripting, because you take these chapter summaries, right, that I told you to do for each, because remember, we broke down the main summary into arcs, then we broke down each arc into different chapters, and then we summarized each chapter. You take each summary of every chapter, right, and then you turn that into a script. How do you turn a whole summary into a script with dialogue? Well, you're gonna have to find out next time on the next episode, or I guess the next part of my course titled How to Make Manga in Excruciating Detail. The assignment for this month, ladies and gentlemen, this month, I want you to pitch me. I want you to do it the exact same way as I said earlier, where you take 2 establishing titles. So for example, mine is, Ruthless Render is Men in Black, X Blue Exorcist, right? So for your assignment, remember I told you at the end of this course, I want you to make a one-shot of your own. So I want you to pitch me that story. Pitch me that story. And guess what? I will be denying some of your pitches. So try your best to pitch me the best thing. If it's not engaging, if I don't think it's interesting enough, I will deny it. But guess what? You get to try again, right? I know it seems mean, but I'm preparing you for the larger industry out there and how it works, right? So if it's not engaging, if it bores me, or if it sounds stupid, no. Another rule, you cannot use more than 2. You can't say, well, my story is Jujutsu Kaisen meets Chainsaw Man and Iron Man. No, 2. You can have other influences, but if you cannot make me interested with 2, you have lost already. I'm sorry. So pitch it to me that way, and then if I say, okay, that sounds interesting, go on, and then have a short summary of what's gonna happen in the one shot. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, for this one shot I'm having you make, there is a maximum page. I don't want you guys going overboard doing 60, 70 pages. You have a maximum page count of 22. You have a minimum page count of 6 pages. So at the minimum, at the end of all this, the minimum I want you to do is 6 pages. The maximum I want you to do is 22. So pitch a story accordingly, a short story that has a beginning, middle, and end. Don't pitch me your series. Don't pitch me a whole epic saga. Don't tell me it's the next Dragon Ball or Naruto. I don't give a fuck. One shots, short stories, right? But yeah, so your assignment is to pitch me something. So pitch me your stuff, and then on a live stream, on a YouTube live stream at the end of the month, or I guess at the beginning of next month, I will go live. You can come on, right? I can bring you on and you can speak. You can pitch in front of my YouTube audience. We have usually about like 120 people watching live. So you can pitch in front of them if you want. If you don't want to pitch in front of people, you don't want to talk, that's fine. You can just submit it into the assignment submission channel. By the way, everyone, submit your pitch to this, like type it out in a Google Doc or on Discord and submit it in assignment submissions channel on Discord, right? I won't look at it, but it's to let me know that you have submitted it on time, right? So if you miss the deadline, and the deadline is always going to be at the end of every month, the last day of every month, submit it to me in the assignment submissions, but whatever, pitch it to me. That's the end of this part. Come back next month. Next month, we're going to be talking about scripting. We're going to be turning the summary that we have into a script. By next month, I should have the summary, the official summary of my Ben 10 one-shot written. And together, we're going to turn that into an actual script live. Not live, but you're going to watch me turn it into an actual script, you know? But whatever, I hope this was helpful. Please leave a comment down below if you want to say whatever. I will be looking at comments. With all that said, shout out to my Patreons for supporting me and supporting this channel. I'm having the name scroll right now. Thank you very much. But yeah, everything you need link-wise in the description down below. Till next time, art nerds, it has been I, DD Manga Teacher Mark. Peace and love, baby.